5 decades and 37 million cars is a lot of numbers in anyone's language, but when you think about all of those Golfs, it's the GTI that really underpins this nameplate. And what we have here is the latest evolution of that. This is the first Australian drive of the 2025 Mark 8.5 Volkswagen Golf GTI. I'm Nathan Ponchard, and this is Chasing Cars.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
The Aussie Mark 8.5 GTI is pretty easy to spot from a distance because our car gets as standard these 19-inch Queenstown alloys, named oddly after a New Zealand ski town. Anyway, in Europe, you can still get this car with 17-inch alloys as standard, but we get these 19s. This car has Bridgestone Potenza S005s. It also has Hankook Ventus, all of them 235/35 R19. So that's a lot of wheel and a pretty low profile tyre, but we also get adaptive chassis control with adaptive damping and 15 settings as standard. The other changes to the Mark 8.5 are this red GTI lettering here. It no longer has the little fillet on the front mudguard. It's got the lettering on the door, which I think looks substantially better than before. At the front, the lights have all been tidied up. We have LED plus headlights as standard in Australia, a full light bar across the middle, and an illuminated Volkswagen logo, which must be now legal in this country. That all really sets this car apart, but it's what's underneath the bonnet that really is the main difference here. We now have 195 kilowatts in a standard GTI, up from 180, and 370 newton meters of torque, and it's the first GTI to ever go under 6 seconds, 0 to 100 in its standard form. While you could argue that the GTI didn't really need many changes on the outside, it definitely needed updating in here, and that's what the Mark 8.5 Golf is all about. All of the complaints of the past are now irrelevant because this 12.9-inch setup here has widgets along the top that you can access straight away: driver assist, drive mode, the cars. You can go into here and have all of the little apps and scan through everything like that. That is all fantastic, and the ventilation is permanently across the bottom, and the heating and cooling is illuminated. And there are finally physical controls on the steering wheel, so no more bumping the old haptic switches and accidentally selecting something you don't need. So all of that finally works. The rest of it is all just a few little detail changes here and there, but it does work really well. The wireless charging standard in the GTI. It took me a while to work out why they would put a flap over it, but it means you can have your phone on top of it and not charging, or underneath it and charging. USB-C ports front and back. It has no options in this car we're sitting in right now. So we do not have a $1,900 panoramic sunroof. We have the standard, they call it sort of paper something or other, this tartan trim here. It's a little bit rough feeling, probably isn't as nice as some of the ones in the past, but it does have this Alcantara-ish sides. This is my choice, although the seats are full manual. We have the standard stereo too. There are two other options. One is a sound and vision package, 480 watt, 12 channel Harman Kardon sound system with a head-up display and a 360-degree camera. I'd probably add that. The other one above that is the $3,900 Vienna leather package that makes these sports seats, which are standard, in perforated leather with ventilation and cooling. So I do like the idea of that, but I do love this upholstery here. The rest of it is pretty much the same as the previous Mark 8 Golf, meaning the plastics aren't quite as good a quality as in the past. You can nitpick and go through and say this is kind of hard here. That's not as nice as the old doors. The back doors take another step down again, but we still have fully carpeted door bins. These bottles fit in all of the doors. There's proper grabs everywhere. The seats are awesome. The back seat's great. The boot is over 370 litres. There's a ton of practicality in this small hatch, and this is why this hot hatch has always been the one to beat, because it's so good at so many things. But does this GTI improve on the dynamics of the previous car? That's what we're about to find out. Volkswagen hasn't really given any specifics about what is exactly being changed in the suspension and the damping and the brakes and all that sort of stuff, but a whole bunch of small changes are meant to achieve a greater whole, and it is a sweeter, suaver car than the Mark 8 GTI. I think it rides a tiny bit better than it did before. It's still quite firm, even in comfort, and even with the comfort set beyond where comfort is in the adaptive chassis control on the screen that's right in front of me here. It rides pretty good, but will crash through on big bumps. You really hear these beautiful 19-inch wheels thump away. And so at least we have here the adaptive chassis control to allow having 19-inch wheels standard in Australia. Otherwise, this car would be way too stiff. I would be intrigued to know what it was like with the standard suspension in the 17s from Europe, but this is what we have here, and it is a really good thing. The electronic limited slip diff in the front is actually really good. It really, really hooks this car into a corner. You put the new GTI in sport mode and you can trace a line with the inside front tyre so tight. And even if it goes a little bit wide with too much power, and you can mash the power to the floor and it will really just pull you around. It isn't as gratuitous as it is in something like an i30N or a Civic Type R, because this is just the GTI. This is the entry-level performance car for Volkswagen, but it still has a large element of that. It just does it in a more refined and smoother fashion than it does in these absolute balls-out hot hatches, even though I know that some of them are competitors to this car. When you point it into these corners here, you can really see the benefits of the progressive steering. It doesn't have a particularly tight turning circle, but it only has 1.9 turns lock to lock. In sport, it has really solid weighting. It's really easy to put it into a corner. It feels exactly attuned to the sort of car this is. But on really, really twisty roads, it does start to make your thumbs ache a bit. You're sort of better off to just go back into comfort. And you know what? For the most part, you can just drive this GTI in comfort mode and leave it as it is. You can select ESC Sport so it isn't too intrusive, lets the tail move around a bit. It does understeer a little bit more in that spec, but at the same time, it still has plenty of hot hatch DNA in it. And if you need all of that point in the corners, you've got sport mode. I can't think of a GTI in standard form, even though we do have the adaptive dampers in the 19s here, that has been so attuned to carving through corners, like wanting to carve through corners, rather than just being an all-rounder. I suppose where the point of contention is here, at least for me, is that where this GTI is now so focused at being a corner carving hot hatch and less so in being an all-rounder, that I do miss a little bit of that cushiness and that sweetness that was in the best GTIs of the past. And for me, that's probably the Mark V, although I haven't driven it for quite some time, but I do remember what it was like. The brakes in this GTI 2 are really strong. Without specifics, we just know that they're 17-inch discs, but they held up extremely well on the incredibly twisty roads the Volkswagen Australia launched this car on. And I suppose it says something about the confidence in the dynamics of this vehicle that they let it do that. And yet here we are in a 60 zone, cruising along. I can just hear the engine gurgle a bit, hear a little bit of the exhaust. The steering in comfort mode is really nice and precise. It doesn't blurt through the gear changes like it used to in the past, but it changes so quickly that it's like, do you want the noise or do you want the speed? If you want more than what this car has, there will be a Club Sport above it that likely will come to Australia that can offer that, but at the same time, this still has plenty of driver appeal. That is something few, if ever, any GTI could have ever done in the past before. Certainly not a standard car. Pointing into a corner, the diff just pulls it in there. It's just great. And it does sound really good, even though there is still a degree of synthesis going on in the engine here. It is really likable, really strong. It never quits. And in corners, you can just tighten your line by just pointing it in. It's really good. It's really, really good. Finally, a GTI that doesn't need to go any higher and doesn't really need any options. So while 58,990 might still be relatively expensive for what a Golf GTI is compared to what it was in the past, it's still a lot of car for the money. And if this is the only performance car you can afford, you get a lot of performance and a lot of practicality out of this car. If I had to complain about the Mark 8.5 GTI, I would say that I don't think the claims of the rear exhausts being that much raspier than before, they're not quite as raspy as I would like. It's a shame that you can't option the sports exhaust on this GTI and have to go to the Club Sport to get that. At the same time, I do miss the manual transmission. And it is a shame that manuals have gone by the wayside, because that was such a part of the involvement of this car, even though the DSG has never been better in terms of selecting the right gear, using the torque of the engine, not being a pain in the bum, and hopefully being more reliable than it's ever been. I think that they've pretty much got that sorted now. Again, in this corner, this car is awesome. It's just effortlessly confidence-inspiring. And I suppose that's what you leave here with. You can nitpick the GDI for stuff that it doesn't do as well as other GDIs in the past, and that would really be just a few quality things and trim, like I'd said when I went through the interior. And so that is what this 8.5 GDI here gives you. All of the functionality issues of the past eradicated, and a little bit more of everything to give you a greater whole. There's no doubt that the Mark 8.5 GDI is a better car than the hot hatch it replaces. It's a little bit more handsome, it is a little bit more suave in its dynamics, it's certainly a little bit better handler, and it's certainly quicker. So it gives you more in a whole bunch of departments that matter in a vehicle like this. I still don't think it's quite barky enough. I still wish it was a little bit more comfortable. In fact, personally, I wish it had smaller alloy wheels. Much as I love the look of these, I think the sweet spot in the GDI still remains somewhere around the Mark V, where it was not too big in its wheels, it still had a pretty good ride. This GDI is now so sporty. It would have once been enough to be a club sport, and yet there's still a club sport to come with 221 kilowatts and an optional Akrapovic exhaust to give it more of the bark that this GDI just doesn't quite have. So while personally I might want an older, sweeter, suaver Golf, in terms of being an actual fast, engaging and enjoyable hot hatch, this 8.5 Golf GDI is actually really, really strong. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you think this GDI is sporty like you want it to be, or do you wish it was a little bit more like a Mark V like I do? Do you think 58,990 is good value for this car, or what do you think about chasing cars? If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video and hit the notification bell, and thanks for watching.